growing up, I went on a church mission for my church. It was a 2-year mission, and we were in sets of two missionaries. I served my mission in Sacramento, California. And while I was there, we did a lot of our time was just knocking on doors and sharing a message. One of the men that we came to, we knocked on his door, and he let us in. Wasn't a really good help. We shared a message with him. While we were in his house, we noticed that he had deer and elk mounts on his wall and a big lake trout. And so after our message, my companion, he was from Montana, and he loved to hunt and fish. And I was from Idaho, and I loved to hunt and fish. So, of course, our conversation drifted towards hunting. Had some good stories. We came back 2 more times, the gentleman. We set up appointments and came back. He let us come back in. And each time we came back in, we'd give our little spiritual thought, but then we'd go right back to hunting. On the 3rd time that we were at his house, my companion was telling him, I like hunting alone. He goes, I like being out there. I get to see more animals. And so William, this was the man's name. His name was William. I won't tell you his last name, but William said, you shouldn't be out there hunting alone. It's just not safe. There's things out there that would just need to be left alone. And my companion, without even saying a word, said, oh, you mean Sasquatch? And Williams kind of went blank for a second. He goes, yeah, things like that. Well, it didn't go any further than that. We left that day, and I wanted to know with my companion how we met Sasquatch. And he goes, well, my brothers and my dad were heading up hunting, and one crossed the road. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. So he told me that story. And anyhow, the animal crossed the road and went up and jumped into a wash. We call them washes. It's where water comes down a mountain and cuts out a pretty deep ravine, and it went and jumped in one of these, and they had no intention of following it. But it was neat to hear his story. Well, we went back to meet with William a couple of days later. His landlord said that he was in the hospital. He was sick with emphysema, so we were thinking, oh, great. Well, we left a phone number, and a couple of days later, William called us and said, hey, listen, I'm home from the hospital. Come on over. I want to visit with you boys. And so we went over, and when we got there, he said, I really don't want to hear a spiritual message today. He says there's some things that have been on my mind that have happened to me throughout my life, and I just kind of want to clear them up. And I took it as, okay, kind of a deathbed confession, because from the looks of him, he wasn't doing very well. And we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what he was going to tell us. But he started in on this. He said this happened back in 1971. He said he was a sheriff officer in the Dakotas. He didn't say whether it was North or South Dakota. And he said him and his deputies were approached by an agency of the government to eventually kill one of these animals. William had told us also that these creatures had been kind of a menace in that area. The government decided, I guess, to come in and do something about it. But William said didn't really say a lot of details. He told us that later that a lot of that stuff he was going to just take to his grave with him, but he had to get some of this off of his mind. But going on with the story, he said the government, or I'm sorry, not the government, don't let me use that word, the agency, let's use that word, had already been monitoring these creatures. They were living in a canyon. How the whole thing kind of got going is they'd been monitoring, and they were going to go ahead and do the project of taking one of these animals or one of these creatures. And William said it was our responsibility to do the shooting. He said we were in a 4-man helicopter, and when they got there, well, they already knew the plan, but 2 other helicopters, smaller 2-man helicopters, had already been pushing these creatures out of the canyon. Well, things didn't go as planned. The creatures split, went up out of the canyon, both sides, and they did have a female, which we found out later was a female. She did exactly like was planned. She went right down the canyon, and they had what they guess they called a bait station. I'll explain that a little bit later. But the female was pushed down the canyon, backing up a little bit. When we got there, William had a small box. Inside that box, he had a cassette, and he had some pictures. he kept this from the agency, unknown by the agency, but I'll tell you that part later too. So anyhow, he had pictures, he had an audio. I'll kind of use both of them as I play this out, because that's what he did with us, except for we had the information in front of us. He said that as they pushed the female down the canyon, she eventually come out in a clearing, and it was a small clearing where they had the bait station. And he took one photo, and it's the very first photo, and he had to actually point me where the creature was, the Bigfoot. I said, oh, okay, that's where it's at. The next picture I see, she is walking, but there is a youngster behind her. It's probably about, well, I didn't know how tall it was. William said it was about 3 foot tall. So it wasn't a baby, but it was still a youngster. And it was following pretty close behind her in the picture. The bait station was something I'd never heard of and never seen, and thanks to Wes, he finally helped me figure it out. They had a oval-shaped tree, pretty large tree, and in this tree were cereal boxes. And I just couldn't figure out the cereal boxes. I knew it was cereal boxes because in one of the pictures it showed a cornflakes box, and I think another one was an Apple Jacks box. And they were situated all over this tree that looked like a round Christmas tree. About 4 of the photos, the pictures that he showed us, showed the animal annoyed by the 2 helicopters. Only in one of the pictures, actually, as she's coming out of the canyon, do you actually see the bottom skids or the landing gear of the helicopter, so you kind of know the other helicopters are there, but they were swinging around and keeping her going towards the bait station. We didn't really get any good look at her. Just to make note here, I couldn't tell how big she was. I mean, I guess she had wide shoulders, but when you're taking pictures from the air, the size all goes. You don't have anything to judge the size on. If you're on ground level, you can say, oh, yeah, this is as big as that tree or as fat as that tree. But when you're in the air, it's pointed at the ground, and you don't have anything to judge the size off it. So I can just say that it was a hairy creature. At this point, he played the video, or not the video, but he didn't have any video, the cassette tape. And the first 3 minutes, all you heard was the helicopter blade. It was just really kind of annoying. Then you hear William say, are you loaded? And you can hear that distinctly. And someone else, his deputy, which was his deputy, said, yes. And then he responds, proceed forward. At this point, William said, I threw the rope ladder out of the helicopter. This is where the other, I want to say 4 pictures, but I think it was 5 pictures came into play. He was able to snap off because now the creature had turned around. I guess I got to back up here. I got to back way up. I didn't think about the baby. After the first photo, I guess after the second photo you see her and her young. Well, William told me that right after they snapped that picture, she darted into a thicket. And, of course, the helicopters went and chased her out of this thicket. Well, when she emerged from the thicket, there was only one of them. It was just her, and she hid her young. Anyhow, getting back to the point where I was at, they took several pictures. All of the pictures, by the way, are clear pictures. None of them are fuzzy or what I see on the Internet. These are all clear, distinct pictures of the creature. The 4 pictures that were taken, or 5 pictures that were taken, where she's actually looking up at the helicopter. She's got her arms up. The wind and the turbulence from the helicopter is making her kind of shield the wind. You can tell from the grass around where she's at that it's just matted down because of the wind, and her hair, you can tell from the pictures that it's kind of matted down, like her head and stuff. Just to kind of let you know the state that she was in, she was stressed. I mean, she was disoriented, I would say, confused, really stressed at what was going on, and I can see why. She had her hands up. I told Wes I noticed the insides of the hands on the picture. It kind of looked like she put her hands in dirt, kind of a grayish black or something, grayish color. But we got really good descriptions of her face. Wes kind of asked me about the face, and I said, well, around the eyes and the nose and I do believe between the nose and the lip there was no hair. The hair was right above the eyebrows and got thicker as it went up towards the top. She did kind of have a cone-shaped head. The head set right on the shoulders, no neck. The eyes were big. They were black. There was no whites to the eyes, just black eyes. She had a flat nose. She had a big mouth. And almost every picture that was taken, her mouth was open. But because of the helicopter and maybe because of the condition she was in, her mouth was cocked kind of sideways. It wasn't just open. It was kind of like she was, I would even look at one of the pictures and say she was growling, had the helicopter blade not been going. She looked like she was like really ticked off. And that's just kind of give you a description. Her color was, I would say almost a black brown. In the photos it doesn't, I guess it's kind of glistening hair, but the helicopter kind of had it matted down. But anyhow, he throws the rope ladder, and this is where the picture stops. And the audio keeps going. We listen. What he told me is that his deputy climbed down the ladder. When he got near the bottom rung, he reached up to the step just above him, looped his hand up and over the second step that was above that, and pulled his arm down, so it really just kind of locked him in. I think he did this for his safety in case he slipped off the ladder. He had with him a high-power rifle. He was using a 30-06. I was wondering if a 30-06 was a powerful enough gun. I use a 7-mag when I hunt, and I probably would have used a 300 or maybe a 50 grain or something, but he had a 30-06. Anyhow, he climbed down the ladder. At this point, William's just telling us the story now. We don't have any more pictures. And he says that he took aim. She still had her hands in the air and shot her point blank right in the chest. And so at this point, William has slowed down a little bit. He's probably he's emotional at this point. And this is the part that's really probably bugging in his life. And I was at that point wishing I hadn't heard the story. I was like, holy cow. I mean, after looking at these pictures, how could anyone shoot this thing? I told Wes earlier, I said, this thing looked human in the face, but animal on the body. It had an animal body, I would say more animalistic, but his face was more humanistic. He shot her, and as soon as he shot her, she let out this scream, blood-curdling scream. And it lasted about 7 seconds. And 7 seconds doesn't seem long, but on the audio, it seemed like a long time. And the scream was just hideous. I mean, it is a painful, awful scream. It even had I would call it a gurgle scream, a little bit of a gurgle scream to it. You had to listen to it to hear it, but it just sounded awful. He said as soon as that scream was done, she left and took off towards the canyon. And he said that first foot that pushed off, her first foot, he said, I bet she traveled 8 to 10 yards. And I thought, wow. And he said the second foot, he said it looked just like a long jumper as we're getting ready to leap off. He said each foot pushed itself further. And he said she just flew up the canyon. Of course, we're listening to the audio, and all of a sudden we hear another gunshot. And we're like, did you shoot her? He said, no. He said, at this point, after she took off, her young immediately tried to follow. But as soon as it got out of the bushes, it got disoriented with the helicopters. Immediately just stopped. And he said they swung their helicopter over, and he loaded chambered another shell, and they just shot right in the head and killed it instantly. Pretty traumatic hearing his story on it, and I just couldn't believe the ethics on it. Just totally wrong. As soon as that shot was taken, their helicopter was motioned to go back to base. And he said we had to get our gunman, his deputy, back in the helicopter. So they flung out about 60 yards. He said while he was climbing back into the chopper, he said they moved quick. They had one of their choppers on the ground, loading the body into a burlap sack, putting it into a net, hooked underneath the helicopter, and they were off. And he went back, and that was basically all he told us. My companion then asked him what happened to the female? Did you ever get her? And he just flat out said, I won't go into that. I'm not going to cover what happened there. Putting that together, I kind of I've listened to every one of your guys' shows. And I kind of thought, probably what happened is she ran up that canyon expired, seeing that she took almost a point blank right to the chest. And maybe they had a run-in with the others trying to come back and get her. And I thought maybe they did more shooting that we don't even know about. I don't know. I'm just putting some pieces together. But anyhow, he warned us at the end of this. He goes, I'm taking a lot of this to my grave. He just said, it'd probably be wise for you guys not to say too much about this. He says, I don't want anything to see happen to you. He actually acquired the camera and the cassette tape. He had it hidden in his lunchbox. They never checked his lunchbox. He said he was put under oath that he would not say anything to anybody. He said, other than us two, he had never revealed this. And I told Wes on the phone that I had never told my family or friends or my own personal family. I haven't told anybody. Wes was the first one I talked to, but really on the mission I was on, I had so much going on that in a couple of days I pretty much just put it in the back of my mind and chalked it up for something I wish I hadn't heard, but maybe I'd research later. And of course, research and stuff like this, you don't get anything. I couldn't find anything up in Dakotas. But, so that's basically the story, guys.